Imagine reaching into your pocket to grab your keys.
Oh, right. You just know they're there.
Exactly. You can almost feel the reassuring weight of them pressing against your leg, right? The jagged edges of the metal.
Yeah, you have a complete physical expectation.
But then, when you pull your hand out, there is nothing but air. Just an empty palm.
It is a terrible feeling.
Think about that sudden, jarring sensation, that visceral vertigo of, well, wait, where's the thing I know exists?
Right, because your brain has prepared a physical space for an object. And when the object fails to materialize, the absence itself feels heavy.
Yes.
It becomes almost like a phantom object.
Precisely. And today, we are going to invite you to experience that exact same cognitive dissonance. But we are not dealing with your keys.
No, definitely not.
We're going to do it with your own mind. Welcome to a deep dive that promises to fundamentally rewire how you think about thinking itself.
It really is
Okay.
that big of a shift.
You are about to embark on an intellectual journey that is, quite frankly, going to shake the foundations of how you interact with reality.
Absolutely.
We are exploring the preliminary studies, the raw, unfiltered workshops of the legendary philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein. Specifically, we are looking at the texts known as the Blue and Brown books.
Right, which are basically the blueprints for his later masterpiece, The Philosophical Investigations.
Exactly. Our mission today is uncompromising. We are going to examine every chapter of these texts, dissect their core arguments, and, well, ultimately arrive at a conclusion so profound it will change how you view every sentence you ever speak.
And we should stress, this is not a dry academic exercise in historical trivia.
Not at all. We are on a quest to cure a cognitive affliction, a mental cramp that has plagued humanity for millennia. Okay, let's unpack this.
It is an incredibly ambitious mission, but a necessary one. What we're doing here is bearing witness to one of the most formidable philosophical minds of the 20th century. And he is systematically dismantling the most deeply held assumptions of Western civilization.
Which is huge.
It is. Wittgenstein is preparing to challenge everything you presume to be true about the nature of meaning, the mechanics of understanding, and the very existence of the mind as you conceive of it.
He really pulls no punches.
No, he doesn't. He is going to suggest, quite radically, that the hidden treasures we have spent centuries searching for inside our own heads simply are not there.
And before we can begin dismantling the human mind, we must first understand the raw, unpolished nature of the documents we are analyzing.
The content is so important here.
It is absolutely captivating. We are essentially looking at two separate sets of dictated notes. These are not polished treatises prepared for the printing press.
Right, they are very messy.
The first text, which became known as the Blue Book, was dictated by Wittgenstein to a select class in Cambridge during the 1933 to 1934 academic session.
And he literally just had stenciled copies made.
Yeah, and they were bound in simple blue wrappers. Then, following that, the Brown Book was dictated to two of his devoted pupils between 1934 and 1935.
Found in brown wrappers.
Naturally. Exactly. And there were originally only 3 typed copies of the Brown Book shared strictly among a tight-knit circle of close friends.
But the ideas were so explosive that whole bootleg trade sprang up around them in the academic world.
Which I love. It was essentially underground philosophy.
Totally. These notes were passed around like illicit manuscripts. And to understand the gravity of these texts, we must look at the preface of our source material.
Oh, the letter.
Yes, it includes a highly revealing, almost agonizing letter Wittgenstein wrote to Bertrand Russell when he sent him a copy of the Blue Book.
What is she saying?
He wrote, "Dear Russell, I'm still pottering about with it, and God knows whether I will ever publish it or any of it."
Wow, he was that unsure.
He was. He went on to explicitly warn Russell that the notes are very difficult to understand, precisely because they are just hints.
Just fragments.
Right? Fragments meant only for the people who had actually sat in the lecture hall and heard him speak.
That raises a rather massive question right out of the gate, doesn't it?
It does.
If these are just unpolished notes, disjointed hints, and classroom exercises, why do they hold such monumental importance?
It's a fair question.
I mean, it sounds as though we are choosing to read a director's messy, coffee-stained storyboard instead of watching the finished Oscar-winning film.
Yeah.
Why not just jump straight to his later published works?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the messiness, the raw vulnerability of the thought process, is exactly what makes them so invaluable.
How so?
The preface reveals a crucial tectonic shift in his philosophical evolution. In his earlier, highly celebrated work, the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, the Wittgenstein was entirely obsessed with finding the necessary form of language.
Right, the perfect structure.
Yes, he believed there was a perfect crystalline logical structure underlying how we speak. And that language was essentially a mirror reflecting the logical state of the world.
But that changes here.
Dramatically. In the Blue and Brown books, we see that crystalline structure shattering. We see him pivoting in real time.
He introduces a whole new concept, right?
Exactly. He begins to introduce this entirely novel concept of language games. We are watching a genius realize, through grueling trial and error, that language isn't merely about translating hidden internal thoughts into external words.
Right, it's not just a translation machine.
No, it is fundamentally about training. It is a social activity. In these pages, philosophy ceases to be a static doctrine or a search for perfect logic.
It transforms into an active method of investigation.
Precisely.
It is the sheer joy of seeing the raw mechanics of genius at work. Is figuring it out, stumbling, course-correcting, and illuminating the darkness as he speaks to these students in those damp Cambridge rooms.
It's a very intimate look at his mind.
And now that we possess that historical blueprint, we can dive straight into the Blue Book's first devastating attack on our assumptions.
The big one.
Yes, we are going directly after the granddaddy of all philosophical mysteries, the concept of meaning.
Right. Wittgenstein opens the Blue Book by asking a deceptively simple question. He asks, what is the meaning of a word? And immediately, he points out a problem with that. Right. He points out that asking questions in this format, like what is length, what is knowledge, what is meaning, produces an immediate psychological resistance.
Something he brilliantly terms a mental cramp.
That phrase, mental cramp, is just perfect. It is the diagnostic key to everything that follows.
It really is. He explains that the very structure of our grammar betrays us.
Because we use substantives.
Nouns, yes. And when we use a noun, our brains are hardwired to look for a physical thing that corresponds to it.
Like if you hear the noun table.
Exactly. When we hear the noun table, we intuitively scan the room for a flat wooden surface with 4 legs. When we hear the noun apple, we look for a red fruit.
So when we hear the noun meaning,
our grammar tricks us into embarking on a wild goose chase. We look for a physical or perhaps a ghostly, ethereal thing called meaning.
And that causes the cramp. Yes. We feel a profound cramping discomfort because we intuitively feel we ought to be able to point to this thing called meaning, just as we point to a table.
And he tackles this grammatical illusion by examining how we actually go about explaining words to other human beings in the real world.
Which is very practical.
Very. He brings up the concept of ostensive definitions. This is the primary way we teach children.
Pointing to explain.
Right. Suppose we are sitting together, and I want to teach you a brand new fabricated word. Let's say the word is tove.
Okay, tove.
I pick up a yellow wooden pencil from the desk, I point directly at it, and I declare, this is tove.
Seems simple enough.
On the surface, that seems like a flawless transfer of information. I pointed, I spoke, you understood.
But Wittgenstein meticulously deconstructs that seemingly flawless transfer to show how inherently unstable it is.
Oh, it falls apart immediately.
It does. If you point to a pencil and confidently say, this is tove, you assume the person receiving the instruction will interpret tove to mean pencil.
Right, the whole object.
But consider the reality of the situation. They could just as easily and just as logically interpret tove to mean wood.
Or they could think it means yellow.
Exactly. They could think it means cylindrical or hard. Or they might even think you are pointing out the quantity, meaning 1.
Because the physical act of pointing does not possess magical properties.
No, it doesn't beam the specific intention from your brain into the other person's head.
That is such a brilliant observation because it completely shatters the illusion of direct translation.
It really does.
If I point to a banjo and say, this is a banjo, to someone who has lived their entire life on a desert island and has never seen one, they have no context.
None at all.
They might think banjo means wooden string or musical instrument or just round object.
Yet because the physical pointing is so ambiguous, we are deeply tempted to invent a metaphysical solution.
Right. We try to fix the ambiguity with magic.
We convince ourselves there must be some extra hidden step taking place behind the scenes. We divide language into 2 distinct halves.
The physical and the mental.
Exactly. We create an inorganic part, which is the dead. Physical signs, the vibrations in the air, the ink on the page.
And then we create an organic part.
Yes. This organic part is what Wittgenstein calls the occult mental medium. We tell ourselves that the spoken words are dead husks until the mind breathes a magical spiritual life into them through a hidden process we call understanding.
It's like we invent a ghost to inhabit the words.
Precisely. We assume that meaning is a ghostly entity residing within the theater of our minds.
And he uses a great example to illustrate this absurdity, the color Prussian blue.
Yes. If I say the words Prussian blue to you, traditional philosophy suggests that you only understand me because, in that exact fraction of a second, a ghostly, ethereal patch of Prussian blue flashes before your mind's eye.
Like a private movie screen.
Right. But Wittgenstein completely deflates this mystical assumption. He asks a highly pragmatic question. Why rely on a ghostly mental image?
What's the alternative?
What if, instead of relying on your mind's eye, you simply carried a physical, painted color chart in your breast pocket?
Oh, I see.
When someone says Prussian blue, you reach into your pocket, pull out the chart, run your finger down the list of words until you find Prussian blue, and then look at the physical painted square next to it.
So the physical chart replaces the mental image.
Wittgenstein argues that the physical chart does the exact same functional job as the supposed mental image. The mental image possesses no special occult power simply by virtue of being located inside your head.
I see the logic there, but surely there is a difference.
How do you?
When I close my eyes and imagine a bright red sports car, I am genuinely experiencing a visual phenomenon.
Yes, you are.
It feels profoundly different than just looking at a piece of paper. It feels like the meaning is anchored in that internal vision.
It feels different, certainly. The phenomenological experience of imagination exists. Wittgenstein is not denying that you have mental images.
Okay, so what is he denying?
What he is denying is that those mental images are the source of the word's meaning. Let's follow his logic.
Let's do it.
If the mental image of the red sports car is what gives the word red its meaning, how do you know your mental image is correct?
Oh, I see.
When you conjure that red image, do you have to consult a second, deeper mental image to verify the first one? You would be caught in an infinite regress.
That makes perfect sense.
The mental image is just another sign.
Right.
It is no more intrinsically meaningful than a painted square on a piece of cardboard.
Neither of them does anything on their own.
Right. Neither the mental image nor the cardboard square has meaning until it is actually put to work in the world.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's take this out of the theoretical and into the physical world.
Okay.
If I tell you to walk out to a sprawling meadow and fetch me a red flower, how do you actually accomplish this task?
Right.
Do you sit down, furrow your brow, conjure a glowing red holographic template in your brain, hold that glowing mental projection in front of your eyes, and then carefully walk through the grass, superimposing your mental hologram over every single petal until you find a mathematical match?
No, of course not.
You just walk out into the field and pick a red flower? You don't need the ghost image to execute the command.
It was act.
But I have to say, if we strip away the mental images, and if we discard the hidden ghost of understanding...
The empty pocket again.
Exactly. If meaning isn't a ghostly object hovering in the mind, where on earth is it? What are we actually talking about when we say a word means something?
This brings us to the absolute crux of the Blue Book's argument, the paradigm shift that alters everything.
Lay it on us.
Wittgenstein declares, if we had to name anything which is the life of the sign, we should have to say that it was its use.
Its use.
Meaning is not an object. Meaning is an activity. A sign, a word, or a sentence gets its significance entirely from the system of signs it belongs to, from the lived language of a community.
So it's not private.
Not at all. To understand a sentence is not to have a private mental revelation. It is to understand a language.
The life of the word isn't a phantom spirit accompanying it through the air.
No, it is the specific, concrete way you use that word in the daily machinery of your existence.
So, if meaning isn't a ghostly object, and if understanding isn't a magical revelation inside a private mental theater, then we desperately need to investigate what thinking actually is.
We do.
Because if the mind isn't this mystical projector room displaying holograms, why do centuries of brilliant philosophers get it so spectacularly wrong?
It's a huge blind spot.
Wittgenstein goes so far as to make what sounds like an outrageous claim. He says that thinking is essentially just operating with signs.
Like writing or speaking.
Yes, it is the physical act of writing with a hand or speaking with a mouth and larynx.
It sounds reductionist at first, but he uses a brilliant analogy to mock our traditional, overly romanticized view of the mind.
The amoeba.
Yes. He says we look at the mind the way early scientists looked at the protoplasm of an amoeba.
How so?
The scientist looks through a microscope and sees an amoeba doing all these incredibly complex, varied things, extending pseudopods, splitting in two, hunting food, reacting to stimuli.
Just a blob of jelly doing all that.
Right. And the scientist thinks, what a queer, mysterious, magical mechanism this jelly-like protoplasm must be to accomplish all this.
Because they can't see the underlying physics yet.
Exactly. Wittgenstein argues that we do the exact same thing with the mind. We observe ourselves imagining things that do not exist or referencing events that happened 1,000 miles away.
And we think we have superpowers.
We conclude that the mind must be a queer medium, a supernatural substance capable of defying time and space.
We invent a magical jelly to explain the complexity of our behavior.
That's a great way to put it.
But he argues that our problem isn't a lack of scientific data. We aren't failing to understand the mind because our MRI machines aren't powerful enough.
No, it's a linguistic problem.
We are suffering from a muddle caused entirely by the structure of our own words.
Which brings us to a specific pathology he identifies.
What's that?
He calls it the craving for generality.
Ah, the craving for generality.
And this is fascinating because it strikes at the heart of what philosophy has tried to be for thousands of years.
Philosophers trying to be scientists.
Exactly. Philosophers constantly try to imitate the methods of the hard sciences. Science looks for one unified, elegant law to explain a multitude of phenomena.
Right. Physics wants one theory of gravity to explain why an apple falls from a tree and why the moon orbits the Earth.
So philosophers attempt to do the same thing with language. They try to find one unified, essential definition for a word.
And the most famous culprit of this craving is Socrates, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. In the Platonic dialogues, Socrates constantly stops people on the street and asks questions like, what is knowledge? Or what is beauty?
And the poor guy on the street tries to answer practically.
Right, the person will usually respond by giving a list of examples.
Yeah.
They will say, well, a mathematician has knowledge and a shoemaker has knowledge of leather.
And Socrates just shoots them down.
He berates them. He will say, no, I didn't ask for a list of things that are knowledge. I want to know the single hidden essence that is present in all of them.
Ah, Wittgenstein says that's a trap.
He argues that this Socratic demand is entirely misguided. This craving for a single general essence leads to a complete contempt for the particular case.
It blinds us.
It blinds us to the rich, diverse, and completely ununified ways we actually use words in reality.
And this craving for generality isn't just an innocent mistake. It creates massive, intractable philosophical nightmares.
Huge ones.
Take the puzzle of time. This is one of the most famous philosophical headaches in history. St. Augustine famously agonized over the question of time.
Yes, his famous quote.
He wrote, "What then is time? If no one asks me, I know what it is. If I wish to explain it to him who asks, I do not know."
Augustine felt profoundly paralyzed by this.
But Wittgenstein points out that this paralysis is nothing more than a grammatical confusion.
How does he explain that?
Well, the substantive word time acts like a noun, right? So it makes us think there is a mysterious, invisible flowing river, a tangible substance that we need to pin down and define.
We get that cramp again.
Exactly. We feel a deep mental discomfort because we can't grasp the water of this river. But Wittgenstein compares this profound metaphysical angst to the behavior of a young child.
Oh, the child asking why.
Yes, a child who constantly asks why to every single statement you make.
It's relentless.
The child's why isn't a genuine request for a complex scientific cause. It is simply an utterance of unclarity, a symptom of feeling cramped and confused by the overwhelming structure of language.
Yeah, that is a perfect illustration. The anxiety Augustine felt wasn't a revelation of the universe's deep mystery.
It's just bad grammar.
It was a symptom of his language idling, of a word being taken out of its practical use and stared at until it lost all sense.
And Wittgenstein tackles the concept of solipsism using the exact same diagnostic tool.
Solipsism is a tough one.
For those unfamiliar, solipsism is the terrifying philosophical doctrine that only my own mind is sure to exist, and that the external world and other minds might just be illusions.
It's very isolating.
The solipsist confidently declares, "Only what I see is really seen." It sounds like a profound, inescapable metaphysical trap.
But again, Wittgenstein just looks at the words.
He simply examines the mechanics of the sentence. He points out that the solipsist is just misusing the grammar of the word I.
Misusing it how?
The solipsist treats I as if it were a pointer to a physical body. Or even worse, a pointer to a bodiless, invisible soul sitting in a control room behind the eyes.
The ghost in the machine.
Right. Wittgenstein argues that the word I is neither of those things. It is simply an instrument in our language, a grammatical placeholder used to organize communication, not a metaphysical entity.
It is staggering to think that entire schools of philosophy, centuries of existential dread, might just be the result of misusing a pronoun.
It really makes you reconsider everything.
And this leads to a massive paradigm shift in how we view the role of the philosopher.
Hmm.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, he is trying to show us that human beings do not use language according to strict mathematical rules.
We aren't computers.
We don't speak in calculus. Therefore, the job of philosophy is not to build an ideal, scientifically precise language to replace our messy everyday speech.
Because everyday speech works just fine.
As he famously declares, ordinary language is all right.
Mm-hmm.
The philosopher's job is not to build new conceptual castles. It is simply to remove the trouble caused by misunderstanding the everyday words we already use.
We only get into these agonizing traps when we treat ordinary words like time, meaning, or I as if they were elements in a strict logical equation.
That is the therapeutic nature of his philosophy. He isn't giving you new information to memorize. He is untying a knot in your thinking.
Okay, I follow the logic of the knot, but I must raise a significant objection here.
Go for it.
We are talking about thinking as operating with signs, as something that happens out in the world through use. But if I'm thinking silently to myself,
Right.
if I am pondering a complex problem without moving my lips or lifting a pen, why do we universally insist that thinking happens inside our heads?
It's a very strong intuition.
If thinking is just the use of signs, why does it feel so undeniably centralized behind my forehead? It feels incredibly counterintuitive, almost absurd to say I am not thinking inside my physical brain.
Wittgenstein anticipates this exact visceral pushback. He knows how deeply ingrained this intuition is.
How does he counter it?
He asks us to soberly and without prejudice consider what we actually mean when we say the phrase, thought takes place in our heads. He suggests we imagine a rather crude, science fiction-esque experiment to clarify the grammar of the situation.
I love a good sci-fi thought experiment.
Imagine a medical subject whose skull is open, and they are looking at their own functioning, pulsing brain in a series of mirrors while they are actively thinking a thought.
Okay, gruesome, but I'm with you.
Wittgenstein asks, in this scenario, is the subject observing one single thing from two different angles, or are they observing two entirely different things?
Well, they're seeing the gray matter pulsing in the mirror, and they are experiencing the internal thought simultaneously.
Precisely. Wittgenstein says they are not observing a thought residing inside a brain. They are observing a correlation of two distinct phenomena.
Correlation, not causation.
Right. The first phenomena is the phenomenological experience of the thought itself, perhaps a fleeting train of visual images, or the subtle, muscular feeling of speaking a sentence silently to yourself.
And the second?
The second phenomena is the visual experience of seeing the physical brain mechanisms working in the mirror. Both of these phenomena can be legitimately called expressions of thought.
But they aren't the thought itself.
No, to demand to know where is the thought itself located is to fall right back into the grammatical trap. You're looking for a ghostly noun again.
So the head isn't a container.
The human head is not a magical container holding a phantom object called a thought. We simply observe physiological brain processes, and we observe the behavioral use of signs, and we note the correlation between the two.
The thought is not a physical object tucked between the synapses. That is an incredibly heavy realization. It is as if he is calmly reaching out and pulling the rug out from under our most intimate self-perception.
We are not ghost pilots driving a meat machine.
We really aren't. But this dismantling of the inner ghost leads us perfectly, organically, into the territory of the Brown Book.
Yes, the transition is seamless.
Because we have established so thoroughly in the Blue Book what language is not, it isn't a strict logical calculus happening in a magical mind space. It isn't an occult medium. The Brown Book shifts gears entirely.
It aims to reconstruct.
It wants to show us how we actually acquire language in the physical world. How do we learn to speak? How do we learn to mean things, if not by downloading a mystical dictionary into a ghost mind?
To answer that, he begins the Brown Book by returning to St. Augustine, who serves as a sort of proxy for all the intuitive, wrong ideas we have about the mind.
Augustine gets a lot of grief in these books.
He really does. Augustine, in his Confessions, described the process of learning a language as a child. He described it as if the infant arrived in the world like a traveler arriving in a foreign country.
With luggage.
Right. According to this view, the infant already possesses a native tongue, a silent internal language of thought.
So the baby already knows what things are.
Yes, the infant already knows what a table is, what hunger is, what red is in their private mental realm. Learning English or Latin is simply a matter of learning how to translate those pre-existing internal thoughts into the local external vocabulary.
But Wittgenstein completely and utterly rejects this translation model of the mind.
He throws it right out.
And because he rejects the idea that we are born with an internal dictionary, he has to explain how the machinery actually starts.
How do we actually learn?
So he introduces his most famous and enduring concept, the language game.
This is a huge moment in philosophy.
He strips human communication down to its absolute, most primitive, bare-bones forms. He wants to see how language functions before the mental mist of complicated, abstract adult speech rolls in and obscures the mechanics.
So what's the game?
He asks us to imagine a highly simplified, primitive system of communication between two individuals. A builder, referred to as A, and an assistant, referred to as B.
Okay, A and B.
They are constructing a building. The building materials consist solely of blocks, pillars, slabs, and beams. The builder, A, calls out a word, slab, and the assistant, B, brings a slab.
Right.
The builder calls out pillar, and the assistant brings a pillar.
It sounds almost insultingly simple.
It does.
But the philosophical implications are profound. The crucial question Wittgenstein asks is this. How does the assistant, B, actually learn to do this?
Does the builder sit him down and explain it?
Does he patiently explain the deep inner metaphysical essence of the word slab? Does he wait for a ghost image of a slab to form in the assistant's mind?
I'm guessing no.
No. Wittgenstein argues that learning a language is not a process of having hidden meanings explained to you. It is a drill.
A drill.
It is sheer repetitive training. He explicitly and provocatively compares it to the process of training an animal. The builder trains the assistant to react to the acoustic sound slab by performing the physical action of fetching the stone.
And this is the critical takeaway, right? The meaning of the word slab is not a picture in the assistant's head.
What is it then?
The meaning of the word slab is the entire completed activity of calling for it and fetching it.
Yes. The word is functionally indistinguishable from the action. They are inextricably bound in the practice of the game.
This completely destroys the comforting idea that understanding is a hidden, sudden mental state.
It really does.
Let's examine a more complex example to really stress test this idea. Let's take the concept of knowing the formula or understanding a mathematical sequence.
Math is a great test case.
Suppose I write a series of numbers on a chalkboard, 2, 4, 6, 8, and I ask you to continue the sequence.
Easy enough.
You look at the board and suddenly you say, ah, I know how to go on, I can continue the series. Now, what exactly happened in your mind in that fraction of a second?
It feels like an explosion of clarity.
Right. Is there a specific glowing aha particle that flashes in your brain at that exact moment? When you grasp the rule add 2, are you suddenly accessing a hidden Platonic realm where the infinite series of even numbers stretches out forever and you are seeing it all in a single flash?
We are overwhelmingly tempted to believe we're doing exactly that. We feel that when we grasp a rule, the entire infinite application of that rule is somehow present in our minds all at once.
Contained in a single dense lump of pure understanding.
Yes, but Wittgenstein patiently dismantles this illusion. He points out that being guided by a rule is not a magical, invisible tether connecting your mind to infinity.
So what is that aha moment?
When you say aha, you might experience certain things. You might visualize a mathematical formula written out. You might feel a sudden release of muscular tension in your shoulders. You might say the words add 2 silently to yourself.
But those aren't the understanding.
Wittgenstein argues that none of those internal experiences constitute the ultimate understanding of the rule.
They are just side effects. They are the exhaust fumes of the engine, not the engine itself.
Beautifully said.
Because if you say, I know how to go on, but then you write down 10, 12, 15, 19, we would say you didn't understand the rule at all, regardless of how bright that aha particle flashed in your mind.
Exactly. The flash means nothing without the action.
The only ultimate, indisputable proof that you understood the rule is that you actually pick up the chalk and write down 10, 12, 14. Doing the action, performing the practice, is the sole proof of understanding.
Exactly. Understanding is not a state that precedes the action. Understanding is demonstrated by the action itself.
It is the action.
He gives another brilliantly clarifying example about operating a rule. He asks us to imagine a person who has been instructed to read a sheet of paper covered in dots and dashes, and they must translate those symbols into physical movements.
Like a dance.
Yes. A dot means they must take a hop, and a dash means they must take a step. At the very beginning of the training, what is guiding them?
Well, they probably look at a dot, mentally consult a visualized chart like, dot equals hop, and then they hop.
Right. But what happens after a week of practice? What happens after a month?
The mental table completely fades away. They don't consult anything. They just see a dot, and their body instantly hops.
Precisely. Eventually, the training completely takes over the organism. The rule has been drilled into their behavioral repertoire. They no longer need a conscious mental intermediary.
It's pure reflex.
The action becomes an immediate reaction to the sign. This transition we are tracing from the blue book to the brown book is vital for understanding his larger project.
Which it is.
He is moving from the negative task of showing what language isn't. It isn't a ghost in the machine. It isn't an occult process, to the constructive task of showing what it actually is.
And what is it?
Language is a massive, sprawling collection of distinct, complete practices. These primitive games we are discussing, the builders, the dots and dashes, they are not incomplete, fragmented parts of our complex adult language.
They are complete systems in their own right.
Yes, self-contained systems of human communication.
And having seen how these robust primitive language games are built from the ground up through repetitive training and action, we must now tackle the really tricky stuff.
The inner life.
Yes, we have to confront the complex, subtle, seemingly ethereal things we claim to feel deep inside us. Things like the sensation of familiarity or the perception of similarity.
These are very stubborn illusions.
Because surely, if I walk into my own living room after a long trip, or if I recognize my favorite coffee mug on the desk, there is a very specific, undeniable, internal feeling of familiarity that washes over me, right? It feels like a distinct emotional flavor.
You would certainly think so, and traditional psychology would agree with you. But Wittgenstein, ever the pragmatist, asks us to look much closer at the actual mechanics of recognition.
Let's look closer.
When you walk into your office and recognize a pencil lying on your desk, what actually happens? Do you necessarily halt, access a massive internal memory bank, retrieve a stored historical image of that specific pencil,
Compare the current visual data to the stored image.
find a match, and then experience a warm, glowing sensation of familiarity?
When you break it down like that, it sounds exhausting. No, usually I just sit down and say, oh, there's my pencil, pick it up, and start writing.
Exactly. The feeling of familiarity is not one single, uniform, occult psychological experience that happens every single time you recognize something.
So it's not a specific feeling.
Sometimes the feeling of familiarity is nothing more than the complete absence of surprise. It is the smoothness with which you integrate the object into your ongoing language game. You pick the pencil up and write. The action is the recognition.
He applies the same rigorous deflation to the illusion of the common element.
Categorization.
Yes, this is a profound point about how we categorize the world. If I hold up a swatch of light blue fabric and a swatch of dark blue fabric, and I ask you, what do these two things have in common? You would almost certainly look at me like I was an idiot and say, well, they are both blue.
It seems so obvious.
But Wittgenstein points out that saying they are both blue is just a grammatical tautology. It doesn't explain anything.
To shatter our assumptions about natural categorization, he asks us to imagine a completely alien society.
One that classifies colors using a radically different language game.
Yes. Imagine a culture divided strictly into two classes, patricians and plebeians. In this society, patricians exclusively wear red and green. Plebeians exclusively wear blue and yellow.
Okay, so the colors are linked to class.
Right. In that specific culture, if you point to a red swatch and a green swatch and ask what they have in common, the answer is immediately obvious to them. They're both patrician colors.
This raises an incredibly important question about the nature of reality and how we perceive
It
it.
really does.
It shows us that culture, and specifically our inherited language games, completely determine what we perceive as similar.
The similarity isn't in the fabric.
The similarity between light blue and dark blue is not an invisible physical thread connecting the two fabrics in the real world waiting to be discovered. The similarity exists solely because our specific language game has trained us to group them together under the single umbrella word blue.
We are taught the game of color categorization, and that game shapes our visual reality.
I absolutely love the darker, lighter vowel experiment he uses to illustrate how far these language games can stretch.
It's a very strange but effective thought experiment.
He asks the reader a seemingly bizarre question. Is the vowel U darker than the vowel E? Now, strangely enough, many people will instinctively say yes.
Yes, U feels heavier, it feels darker than the sharp, bright E.
But we have to pause and ask what is actually happening here. Are we using the word dark in the exact same literal way we do when we talk about a dark room or dark gray paint?
Definitely not.
Or is the mechanics of language so incredibly flexible, so elastic, that the word simply stretches to fit our aesthetic, synesthetic feelings?
He zeroes in on that exact tension. He points out that if you ask someone why they think the vowel U is darker, they cannot provide a physical justification.
You can't measure it.
They cannot point to a shadow falling across the letter on the page. They cannot measure its luminosity. They will usually just shrug and say, it somehow just gives me a darker impression.
Which proves what?
Wittgenstein uses this to prove that we shouldn't assume there is a hidden mystical sense organ inside us that weighs the darkness of vowels and the darkness of physical paints on the exact same scale.
We are just adapting the game.
Exactly. What is happening is that we are simply taking a word we learned in one context, the game of describing paint, and we are spontaneously using it in a new extended language game to describe aesthetic impressions. The word adapts.
Which brings us to what might be my favorite analogy in the entire text. To really drive home how language operates without pointing to physical objects, he introduces a brilliant comparison to music.
Oh, the musical theme.
He says that understanding a sentence is very, very similar to understanding a musical theme.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it represents a profound aesthetic and philosophical shift.
It really does.
When you sit in a concert hall and listen to a beautifully composed waltz, you do not sit there frantically analyzing the notes, asking yourself, what is the hidden factual meaning behind this melody? What specific real-world physical object is this waltz pointing to?
That would be an absurd way to listen to music.
Instead, you simply experience the physiognomy of the music. You understand the waltz by the way it is played, the tempo, the rise and fall of the dynamics, the emotional resonance it evokes within you.
You just feel it.
Wittgenstein suggests that a vast number of the sentences we speak every day are exactly like that waltz. We shouldn't constantly interrogate language, asking what invisible physical reality a sentence is pointing to.
Sometimes you don't need a definition.
No, you just need to experience the physiognomy of the sentence within the specific lived game it is being played in.
That is a beautiful way to look at human communication. It removes the sterile, robotic need for everything to equal a physical object.
Brings the humanity back into it.
So let's take stock of where we are. We have traversed the illusions of meaning. We have dismantled the myth of the ghostly mind, and we have explored the gritty, practical mechanics of language games and training.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have torn down the mental holograms and the protoplasmic amoebas. Now, as we reach the end of these texts, what is the ultimate takeaway? What is Wittgenstein's final, overarching directive to us as thinkers?
He states it incredibly clearly, almost like a manifesto, near the end of the text.
What does he say?
He says, our method is purely descriptive. The descriptions we give are not hints of explanations.
That single sentence is the emotional and intellectual climax of both the Blue and Brown books.
It really is. For thousands of years, philosophers have been trying to act like physicists of the soul.
Building models.
They have been desperately trying to build complex, hidden theoretical models to explain the secret mechanisms of time, the structure of reality, the truth of solipsism, and the hidden gears of the human mind.
And Wittgenstein is standing athwart history, telling us to stop.
We do not need to invent invisible gears and ghostly mediums to explain human life. He is declaring that all the grand, terrifying philosophical problems we face are not mysteries of the universe.
They are simply knots we have tied in our own language.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean for us? It means the therapy for a mental cramp isn't a deeper, more complex theory.
No, the therapy is just clear, simple description.
We simply need to clearly describe how words are actually used in everyday life, in the dirt and the noise of their specific language games.
And when we do that successfully,
the deep, terrifying philosophical problems do not get solved in a blaze of scientific glory. They just dissolve. They vanish like smoke.
it's an incredible feeling of release.
It's as if you have spent your entire life believing you were trapped in a terrifying, impenetrable stone maze, agonizing over how to scale the walls.
Right.
And then, Through clear description, you suddenly realize the walls of the maze aren't made of stone at all. They're just made of words you invented. You can just walk right through them into the open air.
It is a deeply, profoundly liberating conclusion. It completely frees us from the claustrophobic anxiety of the unknown inner world.
It really does.
It takes all that wasted introspective energy and turns our attention outward to our shared, messy human practices. Every time you speak, you aren't trying to magically beam a phantom image from your hidden, isolated soul across the void into mine.
You are participating in a beautifully complex, shared public game.
You are reacting, you are building, you are playing the game of being human alongside everyone else.
Okay, let's take a deep breath and recap the sheer scale of the intellectual journey we just went on.
We covered a massive amount of philosophical real estate today.
We really did. We started by ruthlessly tearing down the ghostly idea of meaning, the persistent illusion that understanding is a magical private hologram flashing in your head.
And we replaced that ethereal ghost with the simple, earthy, undeniable reality of use.
We explored the primitive building blocks of communication through the builder's language games, proving that language is drilled into our behavior through training.
Not magically decoded through an innate translation machine.
And we arrived at the profound, liberating truth that philosophy isn't about discovering the hidden physics of the soul. It is simply about clearing up the grammar of our everyday lives so we can see the world as it actually is.
And this isn't just high-minded academic theory. This is something you, listening right now, can apply immediately to your own life.
Right, it's a practical tool.
The next time you find yourself feeling stuck, anxious, or overwhelmed by a massive abstract concept, whether you are agonizing over the true nature of justice or identity or success, remember the mental cramp.
Recognize that your language is tricking you into looking for a ghost.
Don't look for the ghostly essence. Look at the use. Ask yourself, how do we actually use this word in our everyday lives? What is the specific game we are playing right now?
You hold the power to untie the conceptual knots in your own mind simply by looking at what is right in front of you.
It is incredibly empowering.
Which brings us right back to where we started our journey today. Remember that jarring feeling of reaching into your pocket for your keys and finding a phantom gap?
The vertigo.
Yes, the vertigo. Wittgenstein has just shown us that our grand concept of the inner magical mind is exactly like that empty pocket. We keep reaching inside ourselves, desperately searching for the solid, tangible objects of meaning or thought, and we keep finding nothing but air.
But instead of panicking at the emptiness,
Instead of inventing ghosts to fill the void, he tells us to pull our hands out of our pockets and look at what our hands are actually doing in the world.
reaction.
Which leaves us with one final, lingering question to ponder as we go about our day.
What's the question?
If all your deepest, most intimate, most fiercely private thoughts are formulated using a language that was drilled and trained into you by the outside world, by the builders and the teachers around you, how much of your inner voice is actually yours, and how much is just the echoing resonance of the language games you have been taught to play?